What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about Sucker Punch and Infamous. A few days ago, I talked about what the odds are of a Sly Cooper game. We went over why it makes sense, why it doesn't make sense. I want to do the same thing for Infamous with a slight little spin on it. I'm going to get a little aggressive, a little directly to the point. I feel the next game should be an Infamous game, and I'm going to tell you all the reasons why, but I also believe it is the least likely option, right? So if you go back days ago, I talked about, Sly Cooper, Infamous, another Ghost game, or a new IP, right? To me, those are the four options for, that actually kind of nails pretty much everything, right? From Sucker Punch. And, my personal bias would be to do a Sly Cooper game. Infamous is one. Let's start with kind of the negative. They really don't seem to mention it all that often. One positive for Sly is, even in like a throwaway line, they bring up Sly. They say whether we're going to go back and do another Sly game or we do another Ghost game, that whole quote. Now, that probably is a throwaway quote, okay? I say that on purpose. But when they talk about it and when they get asked questions, I guess they have been asked questions of like, do you think, would it be cool if an Infamous, if there was a remaster, to Infamous? And they have said yes, so I guess granted they've addressed it slightly, but it just feels like of Ghost, Infamous, Sly, Infamous gets the least love from them, like specifically from them. And it just, I don't know, from the outside looking in, it feels like the least likely that they would go back into. Now, of course, if they do go back to Infamous, right, what do? Well, they've talked about that origin story stuff, right? I've addressed that with Sly. That's a tough one with Sly Cooper because the name is Sly Cooper, so you can't just drop him. With Infamous, granted, if they want to do another origin story, they did it with Jin, they did it with Atsu, could you do an Infamous origin story? Well, yes, they drop Cole, they do Delsin for the third game or for Second Son, so they're already used to doing it. Like, that could work, right? I would check that off in the maybe that helps Infamous category, right? Because like, well, they like origin stories, they've talked about that. Infamous, you have like a direct line to do an Infamous game, okay? Now, let me tell you kind of my philosophy of why I think this might be the best idea. Again, in the past, I've said biasness is Sly, safe answer is Ghost, probably. It's not a bad or wrong answer, it's just a safe answer is another Ghost game, right? A third one. Maybe a smart one would be a brand new IP, like that might be the most, well, obviously it's the most risky maybe of them all. But going to Infamous, here's my line of thinking. I feel in Ghost of Yotei, they've largely, I don't like to use the word often, so I'm going to kind of explain it a little bit, perfected, okay? They've largely perfected their formula. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be improved. It absolutely can continue to get better and better, right? You hopefully expect that from game to game. But the idea of what they're trying to do in the open world, how you get from place to place, the structure, right? Like how the game actually feels and how it's broken up, right? They've really evolved it quite well, or iterate, whatever word you want to say. It's taken some steps from Ghost of Tsushima now to Yotei. And I guess the line I'm trying to draw here is I feel it would be a really nice pivot point to say, hey, we've largely done what we want to do with Ghost, right? So I'm almost taking it as like an anti-Ghost thing. We've told two Ghost stories, and we've also tried to get this formula that we've been, and it's a long one. They start with Sly, really, and you can see that going and bleeding into Infamous, and you can see Infamous bleeding into Ghost, right? So it's really been, honestly, 20 plus years of getting to the point of Ghost of Yotei. I don't think that's crazy. It's not just been 5 since Tsushima, right? It's been all of this kind of lead up even before it. So I feel like you can take a lot of these ideas that they've learned and then say, okay, well, if you do a third Ghost game, does it get stale? And you could have asked that question for Yotei. I think people did ask that question for Yotei, right? It was like, all right, it can get better, but how much better can it get? Well, it turns out in a lot of ways it can get much better. It can get much more refined. But I would say, all right, third time's the charm, or is third time where maybe you take a couple steps back? Can they take everything that Ghost of Yotei did and refine it again and have a similar jump from Tsushima to Yotei? Can you do that again the next time? That, to me, would be a lot harder. And again, I guess we were saying that just like a couple months ago, but I feel like it would be much harder to do it this next time. So that's in my head. And then I think, all right, well, why don't you take, like, again, the design philosophy, getting from point A to point B, the way they've structured a lot of the side objectives. You go back and like Infamous 1, it's a relic of the past. Like it feels good. I think Infamous 2 has aged rather well. I don't know if Infamous 1 has aged as well as people think. I think I replayed it last year. I made a video on it, and it was not as good as I remember it being. It's still magical. There's still something very special about it, and I think it was, by the way, very much refined in Infamous 2. But what I'm getting at is I don't really think you ever got like Infamous 2 was extremely good, okay? It's one of my favorites. But have you ever gotten like that unbelievably refined Infamous game? And I feel like we haven't. I feel like Infamous 2 was like hitting its stride. And then Second Son, to me, took steps backwards. I don't know how the larger fandom feels, but I feel like Second Son is the worst of the three. Now, maybe that's a little bit controversial. I actually really liked First Light, but going back and forth, and I don't want to get into like an arguing match over like which Infamous is good and maybe not so good, but I mean, my idea here is like I feel like they figured it out. I feel like from Infamous to Ghost, they kind of transformed this open world thing and like figured it out more with Ghost of Tsushima. And then there were still problems, right? There was a lot of repetitiveness, and they kind of had to flesh some things out. And then we got that refinement with Yote. So again, the general philosophy is it took a while. It really took from Infamous 1, and that's if you don't want to include Sly, which really a lot of these ideas were born with Sly games as well. Even if you want to go from Infamous 1 to Yote, this is probably the refinement of all of the, since 2009, for 16 years. So can you do it again with Ghost? I mean, I think the answer could be yes. Like, you can do it, but is it more fun to go back and to do something with a franchise that you've neglected for a while in Infamous? A couple other things to throw in, okay, before I'm done here. Number one, I think we also kind of could use one of these anti-hero. There's a reason why, like, the Venom game gets people pumped, right? Or Prototype does have an audience, and of course, there was that 2009 war between Prototype 1 and Infamous 1. Like, there's a market for a semi-open world. It doesn't have to be like a 100-hour game. Ghost of Yote size, 30, 40, 50 hours. There's a place for a open world game that's like that with an anti-hero where you choose good or bad, right? Now, I know they've talked about that good or bad thing, and that's maybe another negative why they wouldn't do an Infamous game. Doesn't seem like they want to write basically two outcomes. They have choices in these games, yes, and that stemmed all the way back from the beginning as well. But for Infamous, there are all of these good and bad things, and maybe they just don't want to do that, so just kind of keep that in mind. But I think like the genre or what the actual game would be, I think there is a market. So maybe strike that as a positive. That doesn't really have to do with Sucker Punch. They're creatives. They might just not feel like doing it one day. But if you're looking at like a wider audience, could Infamous succeed in 2025? Yes. I think an Infamous remaster would succeed now. I think a brand new Infamous game would succeed. And I think it would do extremely well. And Infamous was, by the way, never really a franchise that did bad. It always sold relatively well. So it's not like it was like always an underseller. Resistance was, by the way, but not Infamous. So that's something. And I guess the one other throw-in thing I want to say that's actually more negative, I saw this, and I actually kind of agree with people that have this line of thinking. I saw people talk about, like, well, what if they don't do Infamous simply because they don't want to compete with Spider-Man? And I don't know how that sounds to people. I get the gut feeling that some people would think that's kind of ridiculous, but I actually don't. I actually feel, yes, that, like, look, there's a lot of these games that are open world, like the way that PlayStation has been doing it. I mean, you look at Ghost, you look at, like, say, Horizon, God of War has had a little bit more of an open world feel. Naughty Dog games have a more, like, semi-open world. They kind of handle a situation how you want. You could argue, like, well, those are samey, but they're a little bit different. So why can't an Infamous game exist at the same time a Spider-Man or a Venom game exists? And I would agree. Like, I'm not saying we have to live in a world where if two games are even remotely close, they both can't be made. No, you should be allowed. But I do wonder, like, does PlayStation have any say there? Like, is there something like, well, hey, maybe they are doing a Venom game in Insomniac, or it's like, well, we just don't want Infamous really to compete with another game that's relatively like anti-hero open world. It's really not all that close, but maybe it's close enough. Remember, I think the rumor is that Resistance 4 was turned down because it was too similar to The Last of Us, even though like those have nothing to do with each other. I believe that is like the very solid rumor about why we never got a Resistance 4. So basically what I'm saying, crazier things have happened. They've made more insane decisions than what I'm kind of pitching. But I do wonder if maybe they say, well, superheroes, you think about it again, like Aloy is not Jin, and they're not Kratos, and they're not, Ellie or, anything like that. So they're all kind of different, but is a brand new Infamous character close enough to Venom where it would just not really be acceptable, by PlayStation? I don't know. That's why I kind of want to put it at the end. I hope that it's not true. I hope that is just like a fun little speculation thing. That is not how they handle things internally, but you never know. So, as a whole, like I said in the very beginning, I think Infamous is smart. I really do. I think Infamous is a good idea. I think it's a way to keep the ideas that you have really just figured out the best way of refining it, which I really think is what we got with Yote. It's the best way of saying, well, can we do it again? Well, maybe we don't have to. Maybe we can take those refinements and tweak them for a hero anti-hero game and kind of go back to Infamous, but take all the lessons we learned. That's really what I guess I'm getting at, right? Instead of doing a third Ghost game with all the lessons you learned, I'm simply saying take everything you learned and go back to Infamous where you really have that middle point where that was really the experimentation side, and some of them are better than others, and like you were getting there, but it really took you until you did a Ghost game to figure out how to do it all the way. And now, well, could you do it again for a third one? Yeah, but maybe that refinement won't be possible a second time, going from 1 to 2 and now 2 to 3. Maybe that won't happen, but could you go back to Infamous, and would that make it feel more new? I think it would. So I feel like it's almost like a sneaky, clever way of like pulling it off. So I don't think they're going to do it personally. I actually think it's literally dead last. Like Sly, Infamous, another Ghost game, or brand new IP. I think Infamous is literally at the very end of that list, in my opinion. So I think the odds are very low, but I just want to talk about it. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.